the Tudors Dynasty Podcast.
Hi, everyone. I'm David Holland, and I'm the founder and organizer of an amazing weekend that we've got coming up in June in England, June the 22nd to June 23rd, at a place called Cadet House, which is an Elizabethan manor set in the beautiful East Devon countryside in the south of England, where we are going to be celebrating an event called the Wolf Hall Weekend. And it is a very exciting time where we're going to be discussing the trilogy written by Dame Hilary Mantel about Henry VIII and his political life and his sex life and all of the other things that go with that, but also through the eyes of Hilary Mantel and her trilogy, Wolf Hall, Bring Up the Bodies, and The Mirror and the Light. And I'm pleased to say, and we're thrilled actually, that Lucie, hello, Lucie, welcome.
Hello.
Dr. Lucie Bea Dutton is going to be attending because she's probably Hilary Mantel's biggest fan, for a start. We'll talk about that in a moment. But also, Lucie has taken upon herself an amazing adaptation, is the right word, adaptation of Hilary Mantel's trilogy. So welcome, Lucie. Thanks for joining me today and speaking to us all. But let's talk a bit about what you've done. So how have you adapted the trilogy? Let's give everybody the full picture here.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And I've been working on stitching the Cromwell trilogy for seriously now for about 5 years, but the germs of the work started about 10 years ago. And I've done various pieces. There's a piece that I did during lockdown, during the COVID-19 pandemic, which focuses on Wolf Hall. I've done various portraits, particularly of Anne, based on there's a dream that Cromwell has at the beginning of The Mirror and the Light. There's a book of Queens that I wrote as a sort of reference. I stitched as a reference work for Cromwell so that he'd know exactly what their mottos were, what their emblems were. And at the moment, I'm working on a very big and very time-consuming and ambitious piece, which sets out the narrative chronology of the trilogy, which mixes events from the trilogy with some events from the historical record.
Amazing. Well, you better show us. What have you got? Have you got something there?
Okay, so I had intended to do this from my studio where there's a lot more work, but the weather is so dreadful today that I didn't want to get this wet on the way over. But
no.
Here we have Cromwell. I need to continue to stitch that snake in, but he's basically picking up a snake, which is something that he did in Italy. We have the three brothers who he meets on his way across the narrow sea. He meets them at Dover, and of course they pop up a bit later. And here we have Cromwell on the road when he's running away. These all need touching up a little bit because they've faded with handling as I've been stitching them, but they'll be coming down to Calais, and they will be looking a lot sparklier by the time they get down there. But there's about 15 feet of this one so far.
Who else does this, Lucie? Come on, anybody you know?
Not in a contemporary way, but
the answer there is no. Which is what makes it more amazing. I find it absolutely amazing what you've done. But stitching has a heritage. Your kind of stitching has a heritage. How far back have you traced that?
Well, I mean, there are two particular pieces that have, I think, influenced my work. One of them is a piece from the 15th century, which is in the V&A now, and that's called the Tristram quilt, which is the story of Tristan and Isolde.
Oh, right.
Technically, it might not be a quilt because it's a stuffed embroidery. But for a long time, I've been looking at that, thinking, oh, I'd really like to do something like that. But I never do something like that. It always looks it's always something different. But that's storytelling. And it's been cut up quite a few times, so we don't actually really know about the original form of that. And of course, the other big storytelling quilt, which people I'm sure will have heard of, is the Bea tapestry. But I would qualify that with a view by saying that the version of the Bea tapestry that interests me particularly is a replica that was made by a group of Victorian ladies at the end of the 19th century. And they all took the trouble to stitch their names onto the individual bits that they'd done, which is very exciting in terms of quilt. Well, it's not, I mean, again, we call that a tapestry. It's actually an embroidery.
Okay, I was going to ask you that. So Coventry Cathedral has a tapestry that's woven, yeah?
Mm.
And that was woven by people from the same region, was it not, from the Bea tapestry? So is there no weaving in the Bea tapestry per se, or is it woven and stitched?
I believe it's stitched onto linen.
Oh, okay.
And there are some people who are doing some recreation work at the moment, but yes, it was all stitched onto linen.
Right, so you're definitely in that tradition.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Why Thomas Cromwell?
Well, interestingly, when I was growing up, I would have thought of him as being a terrible villain. I mean, I read a lot of Jean Plaidy as a young teenager, and there's one particular book. I think it's Murder Most Royal, in which he tortures Mark Smeaton very graphically. And he always brings down Anne Boleyn in these kind of books. And I read Wolf Hall when it first came out back in 2009, and I was just completely swept away by it. Now, I think one of the things for me that's really interesting about Cromwell is he understands cloth and the act of stitching. And there are a couple of things that show us this in Wolf Hall, and one of them, that he makes a comment about somebody's stitching, Yenneker's stitching, neat stitching. He says, "Who did this?" And I think that's amazing, because that's telling us that this is a man who recognizes the labor and the time that goes into sewing anything. So I think, and also years ago, I had a career as a governance advisor, and I always felt that Cromwell was almost the patron saint of governance advisor, because he was very into record keeping. And there's a bit in the stage play where he has a line which sort of, when he turns to Rafe and says, "Minute that." And I thought, at last, somebody is recognizing this kind of work.
Well, it'll be interesting. We've got, as you know, we've got Professor Dermot McCulloch, Sir Professor Dermot McCulloch, coming to the weekend. He's in fact going to be our keynote speaker. And of course, he's going to get a million questions about Dame Hilary Mantel's version of Thomas Cromwell versus his wonderful biography. I mean, he has devoted, it was coincidental that they were both studying in depth Thomas Cromwell for different reasons, of course. Hilary, from the point of view of wanting to write a novel, his wanting to write a definitive biography. As you know, there's been lots of critics that say that Hilary, in fact, she's a revisionist, actually, that what you thought about Thomas Cromwell is true, that he was a bit of a villain. I mean, if you wanted a monastery disillusioned, if you pardon the phrase, if you wanted a monastery to be disbanded, then yeah, he was your man. But if you read Hilary, he did it with compassion and with consideration for the monks. So even though on the one hand she's got him saying things like, they were raping young men, or they were doing this, that, and the other terrible things, and robbing the poor and so on. On the other hand, he made sure that they got a proper stipend, and that they wouldn't be left in poverty and so on. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting conversation. So do you feel then that you had to revise, seriously revise was it Hilary's account that enabled you to revise your understanding of Cromwell?
I think, yes, probably it was. But I mean, I think a lot of people forget that the Wolf Hall trilogy is fiction. And of course, it's fiction that includes real people.
Hmm.
But I mean, there's a really interesting interview or conversation between Hilary and David McCulloch in which they talk about this and how, as a novelist, she can fill in the gaps between. And I, from doing this narrative piece, have become very, very aware. I've got myself into tremendous difficulties with
Oh, right.
what he was doing in Italy, because and the Antwerp bit, because I can't make the dates work. And
Sorry, with her dates or Dermot McCulloch's dates, which
I can't integrate them.
oh,
So that's the problem. And all of the accounts at the time, if you go back to John Fox, again, that's very partial. So I think that, as she once said, whenever you find something, you see an account of something, what you should be saying is, who is telling me this and why do they want me to believe it? So I think that there will always be as many interpretations of someone like Cromwell as there are people who are looking at what he did.
yes, Dermot does say at the beginning of his biography quite clearly that what he's doing is history, what Hilary is doing is fiction, and that ultimately Wolf Hall and the trilogy as a whole is not, in his opinion, historical fiction. What it is a really good novel. Just happens to be about the Tudors, as it were. Set in that time. It could have easily, I mean, not her first go at this, of course. Her first go at historical fiction was A Place of Greater Safety, which was the French Revolution. And I see Margaret Atwood's doing quite a bit on Substack at the moment about the French. Have you noticed that? Do you follow?
Oh, I haven't. I must look that up.
Yeah, she's doing quite a bit on the French Revolution. But we're talking to people who are listening to Tudors Dynasty podcasts in this. Hi guys, we're just sorry we digressed. We got a bit French there. But anyway, let's talk about Hilary. You did meet Hilary on one occasion, I understand.
I did, and it was very briefly at a book signing. I'd queued up to get my Mirror and the Light the day before publication. But it was, I felt that I mean, for me, it was a really meaningful experience. But I discovered her through reading Giving Up the Ghost, because I live with and have lived with for a long time severe endometriosis. And when she was signing my Mirror and the Light, I said to her that I thanked her for giving up the ghost, and she realized that I was like her, somebody with endometriosis, and she was enormously kind. And the thing that she said to me that was like the words I'd wanted to hear all my life were, it is survivable. And I've never forgotten that. So I only met her that one time, but we did have a sort of quite extended email correspondence when I was working on the first big sewing project, because I felt I needed to seek permission to be doing it because I was using her work. And I wrote to her agent, who very kindly passed it on to her. And about 3 hours later, I was out on a walk. I was out on one of my daily pandemic walks, and I just happened to pick my phone up, which I had with me. I wanted to check whether something had been delivered, and saw this email in my inbox, and it said Hilary Mantel, and it headed Stitching the Tudors, and I just couldn't believe it. And she was very supportive and very interested. And we were in touch not very long before she, about a week before she died, hoping to get together so that I could actually show her some of the work. She'd seen photographs, but not the actual thing.
So if we want to find out more about your work, you've got a Substack presence, haven't you? What's that called?
And that's called The Thread of Her Tale, which avid Wolf Hall readers will recognize as a quote. And there is also a website called Stitching Cromwell. Stitching Cromwell tends to be for stuff that's more finished, so that posts on less regularly, but the Thread of Her Tale is more about work in progress and reviewing. I think of it as showing my workings, lifting up the back of the stitching.
When you're not stitching or working, you do tend to go and visit historical sites, I understand, but not necessarily the most popular, the tourist sites. Tell us a bit more about that.
Well, I like to go to places where things were or might have been. For example, I went out to Stepney, to the house where, if you believe Jean Clady, Cromwell tortured Mark Smeaton. If you believe Hilary, he did no such thing.
He just locked him in a room with torture instruments.
With Christmas, yeah. The church where which Cromwell probably knew, is still there. And I was sort of peering at these old maps before I went, because I was trying to work out where the site of his house was. And I think you can still see the footprint of it's part of his garden. A lot of it's been built over now.
It's Austin Tower. You're talking about Austin Towers.
No, I'm the house at Stepney.
Oh, the house at Stepney. Okay.
Yeah.
The previous house. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I did manage to pick up some twigs, which I brought home, so I'd got these twigs from Cromwell's garden, possibly. Austin Friars you can still go to the site of Austin Friars, and again, you can almost work out the footprint of where the house was, but again, It's changed so much. So I do spend quite a lot of time looking for tiny traces of things. If I want to go somewhere that's a bit more tangible, my favourite place is probably Hampton Court. Last time we went there, we found a quiet spot towards closing time, and I actually read a passage of Wolf Hall in the Great Hall, which was just which was great. And then I got home and checked whether the event that was described had actually taken place at Hampton Court, and it probably didn't. So, swings and roundabouts.
Swings and roundabouts. So the Wolf Hall weekend, and the website for the weekend, by the way, everybody, is wolfhallweekend.com. Simple. There's still a few tickets left. So if you're listening to this and you're suddenly thinking to yourself, oh my goodness, I've got to be there, then go to the website. There's a button there to book tickets. And if you've got any questions, there's also a form you can fill in, and you can contact me directly, and I can help you out with any questions that you might have. Lucie is going to be bringing how many yards? We should talk in yards, really. How many yards are you bringing of your embroidery?
Many. I'll need to update you nearer the time. There'll definitely be one piece, which is the Wolf Hall one, that's 46 feet long.
Okay.
And then there'll be various other pieces in some, and this big thing I'm doing at the moment is not going to be finished, but it will be there as work in progress.
So when people gather around, we should probably do them, do it in groups. Say, right, group one, unfold. Otherwise, your arms will drop off after too many hours of showing out. There's going to be about 80 and 90 people there. It's going to be a fabulous event. We're hoping that Ben Miles is going to make it. Ben played Thomas Cromwell for all three of the stage adaptations, which you've seen several times.
Yes,
I understand. So you've seen Ben Miles in action, and also we've got a cast of thousands. But what's also interesting, his brother is a photographer, George Miles, and together with Hilary, the two of them went around London, specifically the Thames area as well, and sort of photographed very similar scenes to what you described that you like going and trying to find. And in Hilary terms, sort of trying to detect the ghosts in a broad definition of the word, the ghosts of the past that are also still present. And I guess that's sort of what we're hoping to do at the weekend, and is to somehow resurrect the real spirit of what she brought through her genius, her literary genius. Let's not forget that this isn't just about Tudor history. The weekend is sort of divided into two themes. One, yes, we are going to talk about Henry VIII and Thomas Cromwell, and we're going to talk a lot about Anne Boleyn. Of course, we are. Jane Seymour, Thomas, Wolsey, Moore, all of the characters that we've grown to love from that era. But we're also going to talk about Hilary's skill as a writer. Then, no disrespect to Jean Pray, but by any means, but this is a different league. Hilary was a great writer. First, she also had a deep fascination with history, and as Dermot McCulloch said, probably one of the best researched historical novelists that he'd ever met. And he said, I've met a few. So, but also that ability to go beneath the skin of her characters in a way that engages. I'm not trying to sell her books to anybody. I have a confession to make. Wolf Hall, the original, sat on my bookshelf for 10 years, unread. And I came from publishing, so my background is HarperCollins, who was her publisher. And I, said, not my genre. Historical fiction, not my genre. I'm not going to read this. And then, of course, I caught the first episode of Wolf Hall on TV, and that was it. I said, this isn't historical fiction. This is fabulous drama. And then I picked the book up, and that was it. Gone hook, line, and sinker. Yeah. But I still don't read historical fiction outside of Hilary Mantel. So I read a lot of history, but not historical fiction. So it's been great to talk to you, Lucie. Can't wait to meet you in person finally at the weekend. So for everybody, just reiterate, this year, the 2024, June the 22nd and the 23rd. At a place called Cadet House. The website is wolfhallweekend.com. And if you want to follow Lucie and her work, again, just to remind you, it's called The Thread of Her Tale. And if you Google that, it will come up as Substack, and subscribe to Lucie, and you'll have a fabulous time if that's what you would like to do. Thanks, Lucie. Thanks for your time. Thanks for the fact that you're going to be coming to the weekend. I'm very much looking forward to joining forces with everybody else as we celebrate Hilary Mantel and her trilogy.
I'm looking forward to it enormously, and thank you for your time as well.
Yeah, my pleasure.